Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Unscripted. I am your host Shanaz Saddique, and today we are in beautiful Yorkshire, in fact in Dewsbury, where we will be meeting the candidates for the upcoming by-election. In fact, it's only a few days away, Batley with Spen. And today I have a very special guest, someone who doesn't need a big introduction, who himself, I would say, is a brand in himself, a British politician, well known, from a very interesting background. But before I say that, I want to welcome George Galloway.
Thank you so much. Most kind of you to come.
George, I want to start off by talking a little bit about your background, not going into the history, it's not my life of George Galloway, but I think it's interesting for the viewers, and particularly Batley with Spen, looking at the demographics, a little bit about yourself. You are originally from Dundee.
A mill town just like this one.
A mill town just like this one. And you have a Scottish father and an Irish mother. Quite interesting, isn't it, when we talk about demographics?
Actually, the Irish part of me is a major reason for the political course that I followed in my life. My Irish grandfather has made it into the National Dictionary of Quotations because when I was a kid, I came home from school, I told him the teacher had said, Britain had an empire so vast that upon it the sun never set. And my grandfather, a man that left school at 13, answered, that's because God would never trust the British in the dark. And I never had cause to doubt him. It's the reason why I've spent much of my life fighting against colonialism, imperialism, going to other people's countries and stealing their things, which George Orwell defined imperialism as. So it has been significant, that demographic. But my father was a Scottish factory worker, my mother a school cleaner. I myself left school at 17, went to work in a factory making car tires. I've lived a life in the working class in this country, but I've also become deeply embedded, you might say, in the Muslim community here and abroad. So those two sides of me, well, make me what I am.
Before we actually explore those two sides of you, I want to go a little bit deeper into your political background. And you started off as the youngest ever chair of the Scottish Labour Party in 1981. And then soon after you became the General Secretary of the London-based charity War, actually based over in Glasgow Millhead. In 87, you became the partook in the general election in Glasgow.
I won, yeah, that was my first victory.
That was your first victory, and we'll talk about your later on victory, obviously in Bradford West, later on in your political career. But before I go into that, I want to talk a little bit about your relationship with Labour. Now, I know you've done many interviews over the years, and most recently you've come out and talked more about your, let's just say, love-hate relationship with Labour. You often refer to it as a marriage or even a divorce. Back in 2003, you were expelled from the party for allegations that you made certain comments in terms of the Iraq War and in terms of the British troops and asking them to disobey orders. Can we talk about that period in your life and what that meant to you in terms of your political career?
Just to be clear, what I was expelled for was calling on British forces to disobey illegal orders, which is actually a legal requirement on all soldiers everywhere since the Nuremberg tribunal. So if you had been in Abu Ghraib and you were ordered to torture someone, you have a legal obligation to disobey that illegal order. I was expelled because of my role opposing Tony Blair invading and occupying Iraq. Who will now say I was wrong? Definitely not anyone in the Labour Party. You can't get anyone to even debate the Iraq War. So clear is it that it was a thoroughgoing disaster. But you're right, there was once love there. Actually, sometimes love curdles into hatred, as many people watching will know. I joined the Labour Party at the age of 13. By the age of 26, I was the chair of the whole Labour Party in Scotland when Labour completely dominated Scotland. And I was in the party for 36 years. So being expelled from it by Mr. Blair was a very serious wrench in my life. I did love the vocabulary, the iconography, the history, the culture of the Labour Party, but it's turned out to be the best thing that Tony Blair ever did for me. It's made me what I am, whatever that is, in British political life, but it also led to my appearance at the US Senate, which has made me a figure, if you like, in America. I have a television show in America every night, Monday to Friday, every week. I go on speaking tours in the United States. So it made me, pardon me, a more internationally known figure is what I'm saying.
Your appearance at the Senate, it was back in 2005, and that was in relation to testifying to the United States Senate over alleged illicit payments from the United Nations and, if I may use the words, oil for food program. And you actually, if I may use the word, went out to war with the Senate on that particular issue, didn't you?
Yes, they never asked me back. I turned the tables on them. I came there not as the accused, but as the accuser. Saddam Hussein never gave me one thin dime, but the newspapers that said that he had to give me many millions of pounds, something like £4 million. Most of it went to the lawyers, but some of it came to me. This was a time in which those who invaded and destroyed Iraq wanted to discredit those who had stood against them. But now it's they who are discredited, and we who opposed them who are seen to be right. So I could do no other. I knew the truth about Iraq, even if some didn't know it, and even if some were lying about it. I knew that Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction. I knew that the fall of Baghdad would not be the beginning of the end, just the end of the beginning. I knew that extremism and fanaticism would cascade everywhere in the world if Bush and Blair invaded and occupied Iraq. And on all of these things, I have been absolutely vindicated.
I want to move on to, in terms of coming back to the politics of Britain and your involvement in it. Most people would say, those are that relation of love and hate relationship, that you are a fairly successful British politician in the sense that you are a broadcaster, writer, and you speak out against those commendable issues in terms of racism, prejudice, issues around war, around trade, etc., whether it be at home or abroad. But your relationship within British politics, and I want to go back to your by-elections, and you fought a by-election previously back in 2015, Bradford West, which you won. Some would argue, George, and I'm sure this question would have been put to you previously, that you are somebody that is perhaps placed, or if I may use the word, set up to break a certain vote bank, and that in particular be that of traditional Labour voters. Would you agree with that?
No, that would not just be untrue, it would be defamatory, because it implies that somebody placed me. And anyone who knows me knows that I'm not anybody's place man. Look, I'm a political figure with significant support across the whole country. When a meeting happens on Kashmir in the Aldwych, I'm there. When a demonstration happens against what's happening in Gaza, in Kensington, I'm there. I find every platform that I can to argue for my point of view and inspire others to share it. And elections are exactly the same. If nobody wanted me as their MP, they wouldn't elect me as their MP. No one has a right to a vote. No one owns a vote. Therefore, no vote can be broken. You have to fight each time there's an election for your voters' allegiance. I've been elected to Parliament 6 times. I'm hoping that it will be 7 soon. The first time in Glasgow Hillhead, to which you referred, I defeated one of the biggest figures in post-war British politics, Roy Jenkins, former Chancellor, former Home Secretary, former President of the European Commission. And twice in Bethnal Green and Bradford, I defeated Labour from, if you like, an independent position. No one else has ever done that before. And you may see some significance in the letter B, Bethnal Green, Bradford West, and Batley and Spen.
And I think in days to come we'll see what significance that has in your third shot in using that particular word.
I like triptychs. I speak in triptychs.
And I think
that would be the ultimate triptych.
As you said right at the beginning, I think you get that from your grandfather, and no one can argue with that.
No.
The demographics, as we said right at the beginning, are very interesting, and you make reference to your let's just say your political career in speaking out against atrocities, whether it be that in Indian occupied Kashmir, whether that be in most recent days, the work that you've done in terms of the Palestinian side of the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. What relevance does that have to the people of Batley with Spen? Because whilst it may be commendable, George, does it actually affect those people? And is that part of your manifesto in terms of wanting to be an elected candidate for this particular area?
Well, it's highly relevant to 22,000 Muslim voters for a start, and that's a lot of voters. It's highly relevant to them, either because their families are in many cases still living in Kashmir, or at least their fathers, grandfathers came from Kashmir. So it's highly relevant to them when Keir Starmer declares, by fiat, no one ever decided this, he announced it, that Kashmir was an internal matter for India, after a brief period in which Jeremy Corbyn-led Labour Party was trying to get international community and international political forces engaged with that subject. It was an abandonment of the people of occupied Kashmir.
Well, Prime Minister Boris Johnson could be argued to have the same sentiments.
Well, but they never have had any different sentiments. The Conservatives are what they are. They wear it on their sleeve. We don't expect anything from them. But Labour turns out to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. Briefly, they expressed their sympathy with the people in Kashmir, and then they abandoned them. So if you ask me, is that relevant to at least 10,000 of the Muslims in Batley and Spen? It's highly relevant. And of course, my stand against Modi and his oppression, not just of the people of Kashmir, but other people in India, minorities, the Sikh people, and so on. Well, there are 12,000 Gujarati Indian Muslims in this constituency, plus their children. That's the number of voters. So my stand against Modi, which didn't begin yesterday, I was opposing Modi in Whitehall and at Wembley when he was here, when Labour were inside Downing Street clinking glasses with them. That's highly relevant. And of course, the one issue that unites all Muslim people is the ongoing massacres against the Palestinian people, not just in Gaza, but most recently in Gaza, but every day in the West Bank and in Jerusalem. And even this week, on Monday of this week, Israel sprayed the gates of Al-Aqsa with sewage. Why would that not be highly relevant to more than 22,000 Muslims in the constituency? So, of course, issues of roads and health service and police service and schools and the economy are all major issues for all the people in the constituency, but there are some issues in addition to those which are most relevant to a very sizable part of the electorate here.
Yeah. I just want to go through the actual stats, the demographics of Batley with Spen. Basically, the population is around just over 110,000. The ethnicity you make reference to, you make reference to thousands. 76% of them still remain white British, 10% of which are Indian and 10% are Pakistani. Around 5,000 people who live in this particular constituency are seen to be the most deprived people of England. Whilst those issues and those sentiments and that you actually talk about, but not just talk about, you act upon on a human level are important, the demographics actually show that that is a very, relatively speaking, is only a tenth of the percentage of the people here.
No, there's 25,000 Muslims in Batley and Spen, and if I get 25,000 votes, I'll win by a landslide. Only 50% of the people are likely to vote, maybe fewer than that. And if the Muslim voters turn out, as I believe they will, in significant number, then we'll win the election because most of them are voting for us. But we are also campaigning every single day amongst the other 75% of the people whose life has been scarred by systematic neglect. In Huddersfield, not far from here, we're not talking about Paris, in Huddersfield, public spending is 3 times larger than it is in Batley and Spen. This community has been left behind, abandoned, taken for granted. But it won't be from now on in, whatever the result on the 1st of July, because the people have already shown that they're not prepared to be taken for granted any longer. Hospital services, police, potholes, the state of the local economy, education, these are issues that matter to all 100% of the population here. And we're fighting on both these fronts. I'm talking to you about Palestine and Kashmir because you asked me about it. If you'd asked me about the other things, I would have started off talking about them.
Yeah, and that's exactly where we're going to go to.
Yeah.
Quite rightly, throughout your political career, as you made reference to, when it comes to working for the people who are most deprived, your political career says something about that in terms of your unionist background, your workers' background. In fact, you represent the Workers' Party. When you're out there speaking to the people of Batley with Spen, whether it be door to door, whether it be in meetings, and I believe you're going to go to meet a group of people in a wedding, what are they saying to you that is most needed? And I'm talking about everybody here, the 100% of people, the voters, the constituents of Batley with Spen.
Well, it's different. It's different in every area, but the things that come up from everyone is the lack of police, the closed police station, sold off to property developers. Imagine, for peanuts, by the way, for the cost of a chip shop, £246,000 for a listed building right in the centre of Batley. The running down of the local hospital in Dewsbury to basically a skeleton service with people having to travel many miles and sometimes very expensively because transport is very poor here. Northern Rail is one of the worst railway companies in the whole country. So that will come up. These issues will come up in all areas. But of course, particularly with the younger people, people are rallying to me because of my 50 years of work, not yesterday, 50 years of work on opposition to the war in Iraq, my stand for Palestine, my work on Kashmir. And so in the round, we're going to pool votes from every part of the community, and I hope it will be a winning vote.
I want to home in a little bit more into that. You make reference to the youth and in particular young people. A considerable growing number of the constituencies of this particular area are young people. There's a rising number of young people in the area, and those are going to be the voters of today and furthermore into tomorrow. When you speak to them, no matter what the title of the narrative is, it's about voice, it's about opinion. And recently we've had protests about, in terms of the pandemic. Previously, we've had protests about other issues, whether they be international issues or domestic issues. Younger people are becoming more and more opinionated, aren't they?
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
A lot, because I'm, in political terms, the king of social media. No political figure in Britain has the following on social media that I do. 1.6 million followers. Of course, they come from Timbuktu to Texas to Heckmondwike. I'm not suggesting they're all voters in Britain, but I was first into the social media field, and I'm preeminent in it. That means that young people who were not alive when I gave the speech now come up all day and every day and tell me they've been watching my speeches on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and so on. So it means a great deal that young people, through social media, are switching on to the big political issues that they could have been locked out of before. When I started in politics, there were only 2 television stations. Actually, just a few years before that, there was only 1. That's how old I am. Yeah. And if you were deemed persona non grata by those 2 television stations, no one ever heard of you. But now, everybody has all the knowledge in the world at their fingertip, on their telephone. And ignorance is a choice. But it's a choice that most young people are not prepared to make. So if I could turn back time 20 years and really make use of this new bank of knowledge that's there, wallahi, I'd be going places.
Well, I hope you don't go very far, because we want to keep you local for now. You make reference to just under 2 million followers, and that's just talking about your social media, and that is just a figure in itself. And I'm sure many would argue that is a sizable figure, but a figure that we're known about. The unknown followers are people that you will not know about. That carries a certain amount of responsibility, doesn't
Sure.
it? Not just for politicians, but in particular politicians like yourself, who openly talk about some of the subjects, some of the taboo subjects that no other people want to cover, or may feel that it's not right for their political career and the journey that they want to take. What does that mean to the people out there?
I think the main responsibility upon me with that following is to remain true, to remain unafraid. I have never been afraid. I'm afraid only from God. I'm not afraid of any media or any politician or anybody at all. And by the way, I've been like that all my life. And I have to remain true and tell people the truth as I see it. I might be wrong, but everyone needs to know that if I'm saying it, it's because I believe it, not because anyone paid me to say it or threatened me to say it, or I'm afraid to say something different, but that's the truth as I see it. As Mr. Tony Benn used to say, I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. And I think that explains the enduring support that I've got in the country, because people, I think even my worst enemies, know that if you hear it from me, then it's coming from my heart. It's not being manipulated, and it's not seeking to manipulate anyone else.
I'm listening to you, and you actually remind me of another politician, but not in England, not in Britain, but actually the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, who often says that what he says it from the heart. He may not be right, but that's what he believes in. When we have politicians now, in this era, who, if I can use the word, brave enough, politically brave enough, I don't just mean brave from you as a human being, but politically brave, to be able to speak out against the status quo, to be able to stand aside, form your own political parties, even though you were from a significant holding of a political party, the Scottish Labour Party. What does it mean then to be a chair or a leader of a party that its own representation, its own members are less significant?
Well, Prime Minister Imran Khan is a personal friend of mine. I've known him for a very long time, long before he could have imagined he'd end up as Prime Minister. Maybe I'll be able to follow him, but I doubt it. The brand, if you like, of Imran Khan is, I'm not his party man, by the way, but his brand is courageous and truthful. He might be wrong, as you say, he says. We all might be wrong. The important thing is for the public to believe us, that what we're saying and doing, we're doing it with good intentions. It's very useful to me to be the leader of a political party. Of course, I consult widely and we have collective leadership, but leadership is about saying, we're going over there, follow us. It's not about a focus group or an opinion poll to find out what people already believe, and instead of them following you, you follow them. That's not leadership, that's followership. And too many of our politicians nowadays are followers rather than leaders. But I don't think anyone could say that about me.
I want to come back to Batley with Spen, and whilst you have made some reference to the issues that are affecting those people, if top, say, 3 issues, of course there'll be many more, what would they be and how would you tackle them, being almost an independent candidate, not part of the mainstream? Yeah.
Well, the policing would be first, and the closure of the police station. The economy would be second. Already, almost 2/3 of the people here have to travel outside of Kirklees to work, and on very inferior, substandard public transport. I've referred to Northern Rail. It's charging ever higher prices for an ever poorer service, and commuting, even to Leeds, is increasingly difficult and expensive. The city, Dewsbury and Batley together, is the bed capital of Britain. There are 100 factories here making beds. I always joke, it's a pity the politicians have been fast asleep.
Probably on one of these beds.
Yes.
From here.
Now, the 100 factories making beds, that's the equivalent of the motor industry in the Midlands, or Nissan in the Northeast. But whilst the Ford and the motor companies get huge amounts of government help, not only does the bed industry not get any government help, it's actually had obstacle after obstacle placed in front of it from the local authority, I should say. It's another case where the Labour local authority has let the people down. Now, this bed industry is worth hundreds of millions of pounds a year. It employs thousands of people, and indirectly many thousands more, because someone has to make the springs, someone has to make the foam, the base, the wheels, someone has to transport them to market, someone has to sell them in the market. So thousands of jobs depend on an industry that never gets a mention. But if I'm the MP here, trust me, everyone will know about the bed industry and about the small remnants of manufacturing in this area. And the third issue would be Palestine. I'm not hiding from that. Of the 3 issues that are raised with me and that I will raise in Parliament, those would be the first 3.
Okay. And finally, George, in the last few minutes, many people will be watching across social media and mainstream media, listening to the radio, etc. And where there's an opportunity to listen to yourself and the other candidates, they will, I think, listening very carefully as to what there is in terms of the opportunity for people like yourself to make a difference here. Recently, there have been some hostings where you've turned up or the people have accepted, and at the last minute. There was one yesterday as well, I believe, on Zoom. I think it was a local radio or a media stream. When I listened to what was going on there, there seems to be a lot of political dynamics and fireworks going on between the different candidates. And of course, with your following, with your extensive experience, you do come quite high up in terms of the hierarchy in the way that you use language and body language and getting across to the voters. And I want you to use this opportunity to speak out to the voters. Now, for those people who are not yet decided, for those people who may want to change their minds, and those people need to understand what George Galloway is about and want to make a difference. If you can speak directly to the voters and tell them why they should vote for you.
Well, this is a one-off opportunity. We did not seek this by-election. Labour created it. The sitting MP doubled her wages and went off to what she imagines to be a better job, leaving her constituents behind. And I'm here to fill the vacuum. I'm here to be a voice for the voiceless people, a big and powerful voice that many people hear and everyone needs to take note of. You can look on me as Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I may be getting old, but I'm ready to play for you for a few seasons. I'll score a lot of goals for you, and you'll be proud that I played for your team. I am dynamic, I know the issues, and I know how to get them solved. I was 6 times elected to the British Parliament. I know the corridors of power. I'd like to rattle those corridors on your behalf in the course of the rest of this parliamentary term. Batley and Spen ceases to exist as a parliamentary constituency at the next election due to boundary changes. So whoever is elected on the 1st of July will be the last MP for Batley and Spen. I'd like it to be me. I think it would be a suitable sign-off. I think it would be historic, and you'll hear the cheering all the way from Srinagar, all the way from Gaza.
And thank you, George. Thank you for joining me today. So here we are. We continue our conversation about the very interesting affairs of Batley with Spen. And what we hope to be able to do is to catch up with all the candidates and all those people that are making a difference in that very interesting area. Speak to you soon. Assalamu alaikum, and we continue to have our continuation on the conversation about the very interesting by-election of Batley with Spen. And just as we've spoken to some of the other candidates, what is equally important to remember, there are many people behind those campaigns, and those people that we often refer to as influencers. And when I say influencers, I mean they have a voice of their own. And in particular today, we're going to be talking about the Liberal Democrats. And we have, of course, somebody that you've seen many a times, Kamran Hussain, who's chair of Yorkshire and Humberside for Liberal Democrats. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the programme.
Wa alaikum salam, thank you very much.
Now, when I say influencers, I mean, I hope you will agree with me that Liberal Democrats, in fact, is perhaps influencing this by-election, just as it has done most recently in the session with is it Hampshire election there on the 17th of June, in the fact that the proportionate representation of the vote bank that is being taken by the Liberal Democrats can be seen as significantly moving towards perhaps breaking away from this two-party system. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in this particular election, Sarah Green, who was the candidate, took 56.7% of the vote bank there. That's quite significant, isn't it?
Well, what Chesham and Amersham showed was that the Liberal Democrats are very confidently and can ably take votes from the Conservative Party. You had in that seat a very relaxed, laid-back Conservative Party who had taken people's vote for granted. And the Liberal Democrats showed that we can go and break down the blue Tory walls. And it was an amazing result. It does reflect one or two things. One, it's only the Liberal Democrats that can take Tory seats. But secondly, it shows how out of touch the Conservatives had become once they got into power. So it's one of those safe seats where Liberal Democrats won quite comfortably. And if you can win in those kind of seats, we can win anywhere else.
And as you said, in terms of perhaps sitting back and being overconfident, when you have a governing party and they have a particular constituency that they've worked in for many years, and it's considered to be their safe seat, to have the Liberal Democrats, who are perhaps not in the top two, let's just say that, at the moment, to take a seat like that, what does it mean in terms of the momentum for a by-election that we're facing just a few days in front of us?
Well, on the one hand, it shows the confidence that the voters can have that the Liberal Democrats can win. On the second hand, it shows the interest that the media is now showing at this moment in time. The telephone has been ringing every hour, so to speak. People are taking this by-election with a lot more interest than they were doing a few weeks before Chesham and Amersham. And it gives people, the voters, a real chance, because sometimes what happens is people say, we want to vote Liberal Democrats, but you're not going to win. The result in the South by-election shows that Liberal Democrats can win. So people do have a real opportunity to, and if they want to bring a change to this part of the world, then they have to vote Liberal Democrats.
Why is it important, do you believe, that, in particular in this by-election, the fact that obviously you've won a particular seat which is traditionally won by the Conservative Party, within Batley with Spen, if I may say so, we've got two very different but bigger personalities here. We've got someone like George Galloway, who's known internationally for his voice against particular causes, and perhaps as an individual has a name, not belonging to any particular, let's say, a party, a mainstream party, because he's now representing the Workers' Party. And then on the other hand, you have a sibling of Jo Cox, who tragically lost her life. And she is campaigning for the Labour Party. What does that mean to the actual candidate in terms of the Liberal Democrats?
Well, let me start by saying 5 years ago, Jo Cox was sadly assassinated on the streets of Batley and Spen. That was one of those referendum campaigns.
Yes.
We showed the real bad of the society where divisions, which were probably there in the past, came very open and it sadly lost, Jo Cox lost a life. You've now got a situation where you're talking about George Galloway and perhaps other candidates. George has got a bit of a reputation by sometimes winning seats, but then going on to losing seats very shortly after. Bradford was his stop a number of years ago, where he won the seat of Bradford West, but a few years after winning that seat in the by-election, the people of Bradford voted him out. Now, I think what people require here in Batley and Spen is somebody who can unite all communities, and it is actually about working together to bring unity in the communities. and not working or advocating something which will create even more divisions. Because look, 5 years ago we saw what divisions can do, and it sadly, and like I've just said, it sadly resulted in Jo Cox losing her life. We don't want to go back to the situation where communities are being divided for political gain of any political party.
So what difference would the Liberal Democrats make there? Because on one hand you have, so, say for example, George Galloway, then you have Kim, who's representing the Labour Party, then the Liberal Democrats come in, and obviously we've got other parties concerned. What difference do you think they will have in bringing communities together or uniting communities?
Well, the Liberal Democrat candidate, Tom Gordon, comes from a part of the world which is very similar to Batley and Spend. He understands the wishes and the requirements of working class people. He understands the issues from all communities actually, and what Tom will do, and the Liberal Democrats have very passionately done, is bring communities together, bring people around the table in order for us to discuss differences. And be proud of giving people that opportunity to discuss differences rather than advocating or shouting from bus stops or somewhere else on one particular perspective, because that is short-term gain, which has real serious consequences. So it's actually about bringing communities together and showing that we're here to work with the communities. And that is not only on the international issues, but also very much on the local and national issues, because what Tom will do with his experience as a local councillor, he can take some of those issues to the local council, but also in Parliament, he can advocate the rights and the requirements of people of Batley and Spend. So I think what this election needs is a unity candidate, and Tom Gordon is actually an excellent unity candidate. And
we are hoping, obviously, to be able to speak to Tom in days to come before the actual by-election, if we can. You are chair of the Yorkshire Humberside region for Liberal Democrats. You happen to be from a particular ethnic background, you happen to be male, you happen to be a person of colour, of a particular faith, but you do not represent the Muslim constituencies, do you?
I think what we do as Liberal Democrats is we do not discriminate against anyone from any particular race or religion or background. We look at talented people, and we look at real liberalism. And real liberalism is about giving people opportunities, giving them chances to get onto that ladder and to carry up on the ladder without any form of discrimination. And the one thing that Liberal Democrats will never stand for or will never advocate is any form of discrimination, whether that is based on race, religion, ethnicity, gender, or even something like the difference between a working class or a middle class or an upper class. We believe that everybody is equal, and everybody should be given that chance to achieve what they want to achieve in life, and as a society we must encourage those people to go forward.
But seriously, hand on heart, Kamran, both of the sort of significantly held parties, whether it be the governing party of the Conservative Party or far behind, short behind of that of the Labour Party, when it comes to racism and prejudice and discrimination within their parties, they've both held their own polls, they both held their own reports, and the Liberal Democrats probably are no different when it comes to internal party bickering, issues around faith, issues around discrimination, and in particular, most recently, when it comes to the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. So what are you saying that is different to those particular two parties?
Well, in terms of, there's two questions you've raised within that one question. The first is about the internal problems within the Labour Party and the Conservatives, and those are very well documented. You've got the Conservative Party who had an issue, massive issue with Islamophobia. You had their own leader who referred to ladies wearing the burqa as letterboxes. Then you've got the Labour Party who for many years, and it's on record, they had their anti-Semitism issues. Now, I'm not saying that every other political party has no issues. Of course there are issues, but the Liberal Democrats have been very focused where there have been issues. We've dealt with them properly.
Have you had your own reports and analysis and data collection?
Well, the Liberal Democrats have always had this thing about where we try to encourage people from all walks of life to come forward, to become candidates, to become more involved in the party. The second bit you raised about the Palestine and the Israel issue, and you're absolutely right to raise that issue. The Liberal Democrats were very upfront, very straight on, and I was on a show with yourself when we talked about creating a two-step solution in order to ensure long-lasting peace, because what you don't want is innocent lives, and we talked at length in that interview about young people losing their lives. The Liberal Democrats have always been absolutely clear on that. We want a two-state solution and we want long-standing peace.
I think that's been a very interesting insight into what's happening across the region, and I hope to be able to catch up with you very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Continue our conversation about the very interesting political affair that's happening in Batley with Spen. We have international politicians, broadcasters, writers talking about it, and also campaigning and being nominated as their candidates. But then we have those people that have got some kind of sentimental and emotional connection also within that particular area. And I'm going to continue my conversation in speaking to the Liberal Democrats, who seem to do rather well, if I may say so, in most recent elections. And thank you for joining me, Shafaq Mohammed. Assalamu alaikum, and how are you?
Wa alaikum assalam, and thank you for having us.
You are a former member of European Parliament. We've spoken many a times, and you are in fact at present leader of the Liberal Democrat for Sheffield. Now, when I talk about very interesting affairs and doing rather well, I say that with some confidence, in the sense that proportional representation in the last election that we've just seen on the 17th of June, Sarah Green actually took 56.7% of the vote bank. And when I compare that to the Conservatives with around about 35% and Labour with 1.6%, you are somebody that has got experience in working with European Parliament. You're somebody that's worked on local, on domestic and international affairs. What does that say to you as a Liberal Democrat when it comes to these upcoming by-elections?
Look, by-elections are different. So you're not choosing a government, you're looking for a strong advocate. And so that what it allows voters to do is actually look at the candidates, but also look at the track record of the party locally. And I mean, I've been down to Chesham and Amersham a lot. I'm going every weekend, sometimes during the week, knocking on doors, delivering leaflets, exactly what I'm doing at the moment now in Batley and Spen. And people are happy to see you. And one thing that's consistent between Amersham and Batley and Spen is a lot of people are just frustrated that they've been taken for granted. They've had an MP from the same party for many, many years, and then people are saying, well, you're the first people that's ever knocked on my door for the last 10, 20 years. So that's a real game changer for us, that we actually do the work on the ground and people start to appreciate it. And that's what we're doing. We're getting people from right across, not just Yorkshire. We've had people from Newcastle, we've had people from Nottingham, Birmingham coming up here to Batley and meeting in the car park, and then we give out leaflets and we go door knocking. So we are doing exactly what we did in Chesham, and we're hopeful that the people of Batley and Spen may also put their trust in our candidate Tom Gordon, like they did with Sarah Green just a couple of weeks ago.
When it comes to personalities, it's quite interesting that the politics of personalities is perhaps becoming far more significant than the actual politics of the party itself. Now here we have in Batley with Spen, we have somebody called George Galloway, who's known for his international work, he's known for some of his national work. 6 times he's been there elected members of parliament, he's run by-elections. And then on the other hand, you have someone like him, who is actually a sibling of Joe Cox, in itself holds a sentimental, emotional connection with the voters out there. And then you've got Tom, who's a candidate for the Liberal Democrats. What does that mean then when you've got those kind of personality, sentimental, emotional dynamics in the political mix?
Well, first thing is Tom is actually a local councillor just over the border in Wakefield. He's born in West Yorkshire, so he does have connections here. And he's got the experience of fixing some of the problems that people are raising with us. People are not only talking about international issues, they are talking about the roads, they are talking about policing, they're also talking about greenbelt developments, particularly around Cleckheaton. So Tom, one, has that experience. The other thing that people might not realise is that Tom actually worked for me. So when I was in the European Parliament and when I was raising the issue of Kashmir, Tom was one of my members of staff. And that's very important for people in this constituency. And just as important, in January 2020, when I raised the huge issue of the Citizens Amendment Act, what the Indian government under Mr. Modi was raising, very relevant for the Indian community here, particularly the Muslims, Tom was part of my team. And we, obviously not only made national, international headlines, that we raised that issue, and, right across the world, people were thanking the Liberal Democrats, in particular myself, but my other colleagues, for making sure that we raised that issue to ensure that any trade deal with India has to be based on human rights and civil liberties, and we were deeply concerned around the discriminatory nature of the Citizens Amendment Act. And similarly, I did raise the issue around Mr. Modi and his kind of governing of Gujarat during the riots, and I got challenged by Indian journalists to say, well, what's it got to do with you? What's your problem? You've got nothing to do with India. And I said, I've got everything to do with India, because in 2002, citizens of Batley went on a holiday and never returned. And Mr. Modi had a duty of care to look after those individuals. One was 18 years old, and they were murdered by mobs that Mr. Modi should have taken control of via his police. So therefore, Liberal Democrats have always been strong advocates on international issues. You can only look back at the Iraq War, and the position we took, it was deeply unpopular in the wider community. Obviously, the Muslim community was very much in line with Charles Kennedy, but I remember seeing the Sun headline saying, what's more dangerous, a picture of Charles Kennedy and a viper snake, and they said Charles Kennedy. So, we've always been out there, and we've always been international in our outlook. So, people need to look at that when they go to vote on the 1st of July.
Some people would say that because you happen to be somebody of colour, from a particular faith, a particular ethnic background, in fact you are from Pakistani background, similar to a colleague of yours that I spoke to just a few minutes ago, people like yourself, if I may use that word, represent only 10% of the people of Batley with Spen. The remaining 10% happen to be from Indian background. Around 76% of the demographics information that we have about Batley with Spen happen to be British, white British people. Okay. So you, being Shafaq Mohammed, I would expect, and I may be right or wrong, to be actually saying a certain narrative, to be following a certain narrative, to be supporting and defending a certain narrative. Now you, similar to, when I say you, I mean the Liberal Democrats, also have a leader who's a Sir, just as Sir Keir Stamner over the Labour Party. Sir Ed Davey also is a leader for you. Now, how much of a relevance does it make in terms of what your opinion is, as somebody who's working on the ground, who's representing a particular area, and your leadership? Because one of the questions I want to pose to you, Shafaq, is the fact that when we speak to Labour, stronghold Labour voters out there, they don't particularly have an issue with the Labour. They don't particularly have an issue even with the candidate, but they do have some reservations, some concerns, and something to say about what has been said by leadership. And that could also be said for the Conservatives. So what do you have to say about that?
Look, obviously, we do have Sir Ed Davey as leader. He's from Nottinghamshire, a working class background, so he's no different to Batley. He now represents a constituency in London. Ed is quite grounded. I've always found him to be, quite approachable on issues. Clearly, Keir Starmer's problems with Labour members are his issue. I can't comment on that. I don't think Ed Davey has that problem. What I will say is that whilst I might be from a minority background, I can't change that. I represent I did represent the whole of Yorkshire. And when I was here, yes, of course, I came to Batley. I came to, not only did I come before the election, the European Parliament, I came after. I said to Brother Yaqub in Batley, the masjid there, that I will come back. It's not a case of just turning up before the election to get people's votes. I'll come back, and I fed back, and obviously I fed back on the CAA. And people, I remember getting calls from people from Batley, firstly thanking me for raising it actually, but also vowing to continue that battle. And I don't think that battle's won yet. Mr. Modi will still try to push that through.
How do you balance the international politics together with the national politics, together with sort of domestic affairs and local politics?
Look,
because one of the things that's coming out from all candidates is that they're homing in on certain things. And if you happen to be from Wakefield or Batley, for example, Kim's more local, then we've got Tom who's from Wakefield, George is from further afield. How relevant does that have in terms of being a member of Parliament for Batley with Spen?
I mean, I think that's a choice that people have to make, whether they want someone that's lived here, born here. There's no rules barring anyone from outside standing, so it's not a case of you have to be a resident of Batley to stand in Batley.
Should there be, though?
Look, it's up to me. Where I'm a councillor, I don't represent that area where I live. I represent a very leafy area, if I'm going to be the richest bit of Sheffield, but that's not a problem for me. I'm then able to speak on that, so I don't have a problem where any candidate lives. It's more important what they're going to do and what's their track record. And obviously, clearly, George has got a track record. He's very good at getting elected. I will say he's not very good at connect with people initially, and then people feel let down, whatever the reasons are. I'm not expert in Bradford West, but if I went to, if you wanted to speak to voters there, I think they'll give you a reason why they didn't vote for George.
Do you think Liberal Democrats actually take advantage of the fact that there's still seen to be a two-party system in this country, where you've got the Conservatives and Labour, and everybody else sort of fits in depending on where they are? Do you think you take advantage of that?
Well, of course. Look, for example, between the Conservatives and Labour, they've held this seat for decades. So if someone wants an alternative, and a credible alternative that's got some sort of record locally, we've had councillors in Cleckheaton for many, many years, including Kath Pinnock, who's got a fantastic record, then we are the more sensible, realistic option. Who was going to be here after this election? The Liberal Democrats aren't going to leave town if we don't win this seat. And that is probably what George Galloway is going to do. George Galloway sweeps into town, makes a lot of noise. Whether he gets elected or not, ask the people of Gorton what happened. He was making exactly the same noises there. I remember going there to campaign. As soon as he lost, he went. So that's the risk people have to look at, that Galloway, will sweep into town and sweep back out again. We're not going anywhere. Kath Pinnock's been here, for years. She used to be the leader of Kirklees Council in the 2000s. She's a long-standing candidate. John Lawson is as well a councillor here in Cleckheaton. We've got 9 councillors across Kirklees. So, we're here to stay. Tom's not going to move from Wakefield. That's where his home is. That's where he lives with his mother. And so, therefore, we're here for the long term. We're not here just for this one-day wonder, which is the Batley and Spen by-election.
Well, so finally, Shafaq, on that you use the word sensible. You said in terms of, sensible politics.
Yep.
And we obviously made reference right at the beginning when we were talking to you about the personality politics that's going on. Finally, if there was one thing that you would say about the campaign that the Liberal Democrats are actually using, following and acting upon, what is it that you believe that you can do for the people of Batley with Spen that's going to make that real difference in terms of their everyday life?
We're not going to take them for granted. We're not going to just think that we're entitled for them to vote for us. We're going to actually get out there, roll our sleeves up, like I've just been doing. I've just been to Berkhamshire. We've been delivering leaflets all day and talking to voters, because that's what you've got to do. So people there appreciate the fact that someone has come out and knocked on their door. Actually, I was in Cleckheaton a couple of days ago, and somebody actually said to one of my colleagues, "Isn't that the former MEP?" And they said, "Yes, he is." He said, "Oh, I thought it was him, but I couldn't put my name to the face." So the fact that people are recognising us and appreciating the fact that we are actually knocking on their doors. Maybe we're not going around in a battle bus and loudspeakers, so you don't get that fanfare with the Liberal Democrats. You get a bit much more mature style of politics, which is to knock on doors, to actually ask people what their priorities are, rather than just telling them what's good for them. And that's probably the difference between us and the other parties.
Thank you very much, Shafaq Mohammed. Thank you for coming in. And here we are, perhaps not fun fairs, perhaps not big personalities, but sensible politics. And if that's what the people of Batley and Spen want, then they sincerely do need to listen to all the candidates and make their own decision. We will be speaking to all those people involved in this very, very interesting by-election, and I hope to be able to join you very soon. Assalamu alaikum. See you soon.